Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Salamanca City Central School District conversation on school safety. In light of the most recent national tragedies, we felt that it was important to convene this group to discuss what we have done to keep our students, our staff, and our visitors on our campuses safe, to discuss our plan, and to gather additional input on further revisions to the plan. Our goal is always to promote safety on our campuses for our students, our staff, and our visitors. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Beeler, who will walk us through some of the history of our safety initiatives.
Great, thank you. First off, I'd like to just acknowledge that a lot of the people that are here, sitting here, have contributed in one way or another. They're also taking time out of their evening tonight, so I'd like to thank Chief Deck from Salamanca Police Department, Probation Officer Amanda Hulbert from Kent County Probation Office, our 2-3 school resource officers, SRO Smith, SRO Downbeck, SRO Deboy. We have Lieutenant Shirakis from Kent County. She oversees those 3, which is a job in and of itself, I can only imagine. Let me see, we also have several of our school administrators here, and several additional ones are online. Ray Haley, who oversees our security and safety officers. And then we have some other, as I mentioned, school administrators. We also have Trustee Brad Early, who's from our school board and sits on the district safety committee. Tonight, what we'd like to do is provide a little bit of an overview over our current safety, security, and our general well-being practices that we have had in place. Some modifications given the recent circumstances. We'd like to have this as a conversation. If there are questions or concerns, something that we can address, we are happy to do so. If you give us about 7 to 10 minutes, there's a bit of a presentation to sort of get started. If something compels you to, ask a question regarding that slide, feel free to just shout out, raise your hand. I'm happy to entertain whatever that is. And as Mr. Bridenstine said, our safety plans are, we always use that phrase, living documents. The reality is they're constantly undergoing changes. So we have state-approved plans, we have operational plans. Those get reviewed every few months. Every time we have a building project that comes through, for example, this summer, we will have to rewrite several of the portions on an interim basis at Prospect, as well as here at the high school, given that some exits will be closed and we need to make some traffic flow changes, as well as just general safety. So we're going to talk tonight about 3 facets, as I said: safety, security, in other words, what we're doing to keep our building safe, and then overall wellness, because we want to be proactive in everything that we possibly can be. So if we can avoid a situation where we need to be focusing heavily on security and safety, we are going to spend resources on that so that we can just ensure the well-being of all of our students and staff. I do want to make one note. We're not going to be sharing very specific details about any of our plans tonight. That's not because we don't trust everyone here and who will be watching on YouTube, but we don't trust everyone here and who will be watching on YouTube, right? These are things that we will be happy to hear what you have to say and questions. But if you ask, what door do you leave from? How do you measure accountability? What happens specifically during a lockdown? Those are all internal operations that we keep relatively close to the vest, because if we share that with someone, they will know our operational procedures and can then take advantage of those. So those very specific details, we are not going to be able to share with you tonight. Let's see. You give me a click there. There we go. So the several areas that we're going to focus on. One is a discussion of a safety audit. We had one done several years ago, and then we do ongoing ones. Some of the physical plant changes that we have made. So in other words, what have we done to our buildings? The safety planning that goes into place. Our drills and practice. What do we do to put our plan into place? We're also going to talk a little bit about the climate and culture. So what are some of those expectations that we have? How does that start? The SEL, or social emotional learning and mental health procedures and supports that we have in place, and then the communication and collaboration that we have with all of the stakeholders in the Salamanca community. So going back to 2016, 2017, the district underwent a very comprehensive review of our practices as well as our physical structure. Those recommendations that were provided back to us were in 3 different documents, one for each one of our buildings, and then an overall district presentation. Those were used to inform capital projects that started back in 2018, as well as continue right now. So all of those, I can't say all of them, the vast majority of those recommendations have been implemented, and I'll talk a little bit about what those were. As far as the physical construction goes, as well as operationally, how we modified our plans and why we do some of the things that we do. So the first thing that we can talk about are the physical plan. And you'll notice most of our employees all have swipe card accesses. About 3 years ago, we implemented a new access control system. This way we can monitor every single one of our doors. As far as who can go in, we can control who goes in, when they go in, and we have a safety log to ensure we know who went into what spaces. Those can be completely customized. They're integrated and are in the process, I should say, being integrated with our camera system, so that if someone swipes into an area that we consider to be secure, it will also trip several other, actions, such as the cameras will go on. The access control system is also going to be integrated into some of the other safety procedures and that we have, such as our Halo system, which will tell us when a student is vaping. There's also other features, for example, loud sounds such as gunshots will trigger an alert through our Halo. A Halo is a device, it's connected to our internet, and it communicates to us in a variety of different ways. We've also upgraded the camera surveillance systems. Pretty much anywhere on any of our campuses, you will be recorded. We do not, in case anybody's going to ask, use any form of bioinformatics. So New York State does not permit any facial recognition, fingerprinting, anything like that in schools, and we do not have any of those systems here. We also have a new phone system that was implemented. The phone system allows us to communicate, obviously, with the outside world, but there are some safety features that are included in there. For example, when an individual picks up the phone and calls 911, several other leaders within the building are notified of the 911 call. We can pick up the phone and actually listen into the conversation so that we can understand what's going on and then take action to assist. We have panic and lockdown buttons throughout the hall, as well as in other designated spaces. Schools have traditionally had pull stations for fire alarms. Well, now we have a similar station to that for lockdown. And in a lockdown, we also have in all of the buildings lights and an automated siren system, as well as a voice recording that instructs individuals to get to a secure place, that we are in a lockdown configuration. All of the doors get locked at that point in time. We have secure vestibules. So most of you, if not all of you, came in through the main entrance at the high school. That is what we refer to as a secure vestibule. You cannot simply walk into any of our buildings. We also refer to those as sort of a man trap. Once you're in there until we provide you with access into the school building proper. We've also upgraded our wireless communications, our radio system. So we have wireless radios that are used to communicate between individuals on the various campuses and well as within campus. And that was upgraded about 4 years ago so that we have complete coverage throughout the city. Any questions on anything I've presented so far? Being online? Okay, keep going. Safety planning. So we can have all of these great facilities, great devices, but unless we have plans that implement them in a sound and secure manner, they're relatively useless. So we consistently update those plans. It's one of Mr. Haley's jobs. They're reviewed both internally as well as externally with other individuals. We also added 3 years ago a robust security and safety officer program. Any one of our schools today, tomorrow that you'll walk into, there will be at least one safety officer. They usually have a red shirt on at the doors. They welcome individuals. They will also assist them in coming into the building. Anyone who enters into our building gets what we refer to as Raptored. There's a system called Raptor that checks the license of the individual or their name against the database of recognized individuals or our own internal database, so that it'll trip a center. It'll let us know if there's a concern with that particular individual. We also increased the number of school resource officers we have about 5 years ago. Maybe
Yeah,
4
we
years
started,
ago.
well, I think we started 4 or 5 years ago, and then we've gotten to full force now.
So we now have a school resource officer at each one of our buildings. So that's a total of 3 school resource officer. And then, as I mentioned, part of the annual process of updating our internal plans is a review that follows or an audit following the state guidance. So basically a checklist that we go through just to make sure that we're doing everything possible to create a safe environment. And then we have drills and practices. So we've all been at school before. We remember fire drills. So there's a specific number of fire drills that are required. We now have lockdown drills that are required by the state. I think back to when lockdowns were a new concept in schools, and we never really had a drill for lockdowns. And in the event, I'll tell you, the first time that we did lockdown drills, everyone was a little bit scared. They didn't know what to do. We moved to secure spaces in a classroom. Younger students might go into a closet to get out of the view. All the doors are locked. We clear people out of the halls. There's nothing super secret about this. It's just standard practice. But we are now required, and we do have lockdown drills throughout the year. We've also implemented, just as a note, which all schools have out of requirement, post 9/11, we went to a national system for identifying what we call protocols or certain actions. Different districts and different schools had different maybe codes at one point in time. There used to be code blue for a bomb threat, code white for a medical emergency. The problem is that people on campus that are trained know what that means, but everybody else has no idea what that means. So there was a shift in communications about a long time ago now, about 18 years ago, so that we shifted out of any codes or 10 system and put it into common English. So now if you go to any federal building or state-run school, you'll see things like lockout, lockdown, shelter in place. It's common language across wherever you are so that people understand what's happening. And then in most of those facilities, the actions are about the same. So we, of course, put those into place and we drill those on a regular basis. We also have EMS drills, so emergency medical service drills. Some are planned. In other words, we'll engage with our students who are, we actually have a class, an EMS class for emergency preparedness at the high school. They assist in the development of some of these drills. We have our required bus emergency drills and then evacuation drills. We have not had an evacuation drill recently. Some of that was due to pandemic conditions and concerns over getting people close. But we know we have one scheduled for the fall. An off-site evacuation is when we take all of the students and staff from one facility, get them literally off-site and do a full accountability to ensure we know where everybody is. All of that is part of a reunification process that we have documented so that if we had to go off-site, how do we get parents to be unified with the students? And how do we make sure that they're the correct parents with the correct students? All of those are part of the plans that we have in place. And like I said, though, we haven't drilled on that in about 1.5 years, but that'll be coming up in the fall. All right, take a breather. Questions so far?
So let me provide a little historical context here. Most of us have gone through public schools or school in some capacity and are familiar with fire drills. It's ingrained. It's almost instinctual to our students and to our faculty. You grab the kids, you grab your roster, you head out to the nearest exit, you move away from the building, you take your head count, you radio it in. It's all very mechanized, organized, and for the most part, seamless. But for what most might not know, the last serious school fire in New York State was in 1954. So for nearly 65 years, we have done this as if it was second nature. All of these other drills have evolved really in the past 15 or 18 years. I'd say since Columbine 20 years ago. So this is not new, but These are newer interventions, and as the technology evolves, we have to adopt, and I think we've done a reasonably good job and mindset of adopting the philosophy that everyone is responsible for safety on a daily basis. Our job is not to just instruct children, but to keep them safe. When parents and families give us their children each and every day, and when families give us their husbands and wives and brothers and sisters, our job is daily to keep them safe and responsible. And from time to time, we have to adjust our protocols. And that's really one of the things that we're really focused in and talking about that. And I think one of the things that in the pandemic, we need to revisit is not only is everyone responsible for safety on a daily basis, but everyone is also responsible for correcting a safety violation that may occur, propping a door open, or being a little less cavalier about letting someone in that you know, but the rest of the building may not know. So we have to return back to those daily basics that have protected us for a long time. And it's also everyone's responsibility to help us improve safety. We can't afford to sit back and say, oh, well, I think this will help make it safer, but I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to be that person. I'm not suggesting we're going to dig a moat around the building and a drawbridge, but there are things technologically that we have implemented that help us to be safer and to make sure that everyone knows how to do them. Dr. Wheeler mentioned the color coding, which was vastly confusing. We have very few drills that we do: shelter in place, lock out, and lock down. That's pretty much it. So everyone has a role in that, and the goal tonight and over the next however length of time is if we see something that's working, we need to make sure everybody understands it. If we see something that's not working or isn't implementable but might be a great idea, then we need to find ways to make it better.
Okay. So the other piece is climate and culture. You're all here tonight because in reality, there's a sudden focus on school safety. If I had this 3 weeks ago, pretty sure we wouldn't have the number of people that were tonight or online for that matter. One of the realities with safety and security is that they're typically obstacles to efficient movement of your daily activities. So after a while, they become a pain and people start to defeat them. So for years, we've talked about the propped open door at the back of every single school, right? Where years ago, people would go out and have a cigarette. Now we don't do that anymore. Now they go out and get a breath of fresh air, whatever they do, all right? And everyone knew that's how you get into a school. Every kid who's skipping class, every person who wanted to do harm. Now we have a similar situation, and we just saw last week that we had a horrific incident that occurred, and it was enabled by a propped open door. So when we talk about climate and culture, that is an ongoing effort from our safety officers, from our school resource officers, from our leadership team to constantly be reminding people the doors have to be closed. We need to make sure we know who we're letting into the building. Use a single point of entrance so that we can keep an eye on who's coming into the building. Some of the features of that security and access control system that we talked about, allow us to identify doors that are open for a certain length of time, say 90 seconds. Well, then we know somebody has probably propped open one of those doors. We go and we can unlock or close that door. But we have the benefit of having, like we said, the security officers and our school resource officers, and their sole function is to consistently remind us that we need to have safety at the forefront of our thoughts and our concerns. So they help us with reminding us to keep doors closed. They help us with reminding us to not let people in that we don't know. They help us to recall that we shouldn't just let somebody into the building and assume that they're going to be just perfectly fine walking down the hall and around the corner. They're going to go exactly where they're supposed to go. But typically they don't. So while we, especially in education, like to think the best of people, it's good to have our security officers and our school resource officers who know that people are great, but there's a certain number of people out there who are not great, and they will do us harm at any opportunity they can, and they keep that with us. So several times throughout the year, we have refreshers on safety and security that's usually presented by our school resource officers. We also have electronic courses that are taken, because we're not only talking about physical safety here, but we also have cybersecurity that need to be concerned, because information can be accessed and then that can be used against us as well. The other piece that sort of ties along with climate and culture is monitoring our students and our staff. So we know time and time again that many times in a horrific student or school incident, that it's somebody that they know, right? It's a student who comes in, or it could just be some intruder from entirely outside. We're concerned because we need to make sure we're doing the best that we can for our students. So we have done an awful lot focusing on the social emotional well-being and providing mental health supports to our students as well as to our staff. Throughout this year in particular, we have had ongoing student and staff wellness checks done by both internal and external individuals. We have a social emotional learning coach who can help us do a better job of meeting our student needs so that we don't have students who feel ostracized. We have social workers, we have school counselors, we have family school liaisons, and we have psychologists who work throughout the day to ensure that our students, as well as our staff, are in a good mental state. And then we regularly remind our staff that if you see something or hear something, you need to report that out. And I'm pretty confident that we have a pretty solid rapport with our students, that information does come to us. It's taken a little bit of time after the pandemic to sort of build those relationships back up. And in all reality, we sometimes have forgotten how to act as students and adults and adults in our schools. And that's not just here, that's across the board. So having these individuals help along with that is helpful as well. Any thoughts or questions so far? I know we have a question online, so I'll take that one. And this has come up a couple times. Clear book bags and metal detectors. I'll take a crack at that one myself, given the training that I've had the opportunity to go through. And then I'm also going to ask our school resource officers for some input as well. So sometimes metal detectors, I'll deal with that one first. Metal detectors are obviously devices that are at a single point of entrance or at the primary entrance points that everybody comes through. You will find them in many of the urban settings, many times because the configuration of their buildings allows them to be more successful in their deployment. In other words, if you think of an urban school, many times there's a perimeter around it that's secure, maybe with a fence or a 3-foot wall, and people aren't going up to, say, windows or other doors. Many times those buildings are also elevated so that students couldn't just hand up whatever it is to the window. Our configuration in our buildings does not really allow for those to be as successfully deployed, meaning we can have a single point of entry. Students can walk through a metal detector, and then they can go to any one of the windows in a classroom, reach outside and pull a book bag in. The whole metal detector has been defeated. They could go to another door, open the door, pick in whatever they wanted. They could come to us during a basketball game the night before, unless we're going to have a metal detector for every single visitor and every single spectator, they could put it in a lock. Now, this isn't sounding very secure and safe, but I don't mean to be the doomsday, but this is the reality of what we're facing. They can put it in a locker and just get it the next day. So in some settings, metal detectors can be successfully deployed. In our setting, we have concerns over how would be implemented, and we just don't see them being successful. Clear book bags. We already don't allow students to carry book bags from class to class. That has been a safety concern because we don't know what's in it. Also, they're literally a trip hazard if we had to get out of the building or out of the classroom in an expedient manner. We could shift to clear bags. The other piece, though, is we have to then constantly be having somebody look at those bags. And I can have a clear bag, and I can still put all sorts of things in there that are going to make it through even the most watchful eyes. So unless we're actually inspecting the bags, those appear, both of those ideas seem to be great ideas until they're put into place, and then operationally, they don't seem to be as effective. So I'll rely on our school resource officers. On any other thoughts? Am I off base totally? Or-
No, you hit me.
Not gonna be in the bag, it doesn't have to be in the bag.
Yeah.
I said clear bags too in theory are good, but like think about lacrosse season. I mean, are we gonna make them all have like clear lacrosse bags? It's just not feasible.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts or questions on that? I do want this to sort of be a back and forth dialogue as if it was a conversation, although I feel like we're gonna pit down here.
Yeah, I think with regard to the clear backpacks, again, it's one of those great idea that'll solve some problems. It may very well create more problems. There are other districts in Western New York who have gone to an all clear backpack thing, the protocol. And it was an absolute disaster because of social and medical privacy, and I'm particularly talking about females. It didn't go well. They implemented it in 2 specific school districts in Erie County, and within 72 hours, there was an outrage, and they went too far, too fast. That's the balance that we have to implement. So, if we were having issues with items smuggled into school, Officer Smith is right. They'll be in their pants pocket or their coat pocket. So we just have to balance that. One of the things that concerns me the most, to be quite honest, is every single Salamanca campus is essentially a ranch with not just access points, but hundreds of access points. So metal detectors, while in theory, kind of like the clear backpacks, make sense, it's one of those unimplementable issues that might not serve the overall goal of keeping us safer. One of the elements that could make us safer is if we require all individuals at the beginning of the day and then throughout the day to enter through a single point of accountability and access. Just coming back from the airport from going to Iowa with our OM kids, yay OM. You don't get to negotiate which door you go into it, Des Moines or Buffalo or Minneapolis airport. There's one door. We allow students and staff to come in any one of dozens of entrances. That's something that seems to be something that we can look at to tighten up. Now, I will tell you the downside is that there will be students and there will be staff members who say it's too far to walk. I'm carrying stuff in. I need this access I need, as opposed to what we need as a safer campus. I'm not advocating one entrance for 1,400 students, but it seems to me that we can have dedicated entrances at arrival at those proverbial pressure points when we're unloading 1,400 students, either at Seneca, the high school, or Prospect. That makes sense. We have common entry points at Betts Park, probably one too many for my tasting, but we've got 1 or 2 entrances. We have unlimited entrances on the track entrance because they just can come from anywhere. So we're trying to work on those issues, but those are some things that I think we can have a good conversation about. How do we tighten that up so that it's less congested and safer?
Final part of our opening presentation is really on communication and collaboration. We as a district can put all sorts of great things in place, but unless we have an open relationship with our partners in the community and in law enforcement, we're going to be working in isolation and we're going to be nowhere near as successful as we can be. So it's important for us to recognize that everything that we do here is a collaboration. It's a collaboration with the Salamanca Police Department, the Seneca Nation of Indians Marshals, the Cat County Sheriff's Department, other county and city officials that come together when both in a time of need, as well as when we just need to sit down and put a plan together for how we're going to be successful moving forward. We are always able to get in touch with each other and share information on a regular basis. And I believe that that's probably our single most greatest advantage in deterring and making sure that we can provide a safe environment for our students and staff. And I really just wanted to extend my gratitude to our community partners. We had a meeting today to discuss a little bit about this, but then some other bigger issues. And in a matter of less than a week, we had 3 probation officer representatives, the city mayor, the city police chief. We had sheriffs there and marshals, all sat down for an hour to talk through some circumstances that we're going to try and make some improvements in. And that is the type of collaboration and teamwork that really makes this to be the safest place possible. So at this point in time, we're just going to really open it up for questions. Are there things that you would like to know, that you'd like to see? As I said, we're always open for improvement. And we're looking for suggestions of things people might see that maybe we don't see as clearly.
After 30 years in DC, I think I've seen it all, but most important thing here, when I sit up there at the desk, first thing that flashes in my mind, somebody's coming in. Am I going to fight with a toothpick? We have to have armed officers at these doors. Now, I'm not saying these guys, they're busy, but I'm thinking a couple of police officers retiring that aren't over the thing. You know, I really talked to, I've got a lot of phone calls about guys I used to work with in the Secret Service, whatever. Everybody says, you don't have armed policemen at the door. You know. Right. Now, I know the other schools, they thought they didn't, you know, some schools don't have a resource. But to me, this is a real big deal. Because how are you gonna stop them? You know, they got an AK, whatever, and then this guy had 100 rounds shot. What, 21, 22 people? Right. He could have shot another 50. You know, I'm not getting involved with police, that's another story. That's a big thing to me. And I think you gotta have armed people, not go around the school, hire a couple of policemen to have a weapon.
All right, very good.
You know, that's right.
Okay. So,
Hi, my, I guess concern is not from me. I was kind of surprised the person asked if I was coming tonight. But they came to the school on budget and they were working the budget. And they were surprised that the doors were wide open. It wasn't vote time yet. Nobody checked to make sure that they were, like there was a roster or anything. The people at the door just pointed and said, there goes Jim. They were very uncomfortable and they didn't know who to direct. Maybe it should have gone to Ray because I would assume that.
Well, I know we had at least 2 security guards at the door.
They, yep, they said
That's
that,
the only time that the door will be dropped open.
but the person's concern was that 2 employees at the desk were on their phones, neither looked up, said hello, needed to work the vote, then one just pointed at the gym and the other person didn't even look up. And this person was concerned because there was a lapse, a prop door, you might say,
Sure.
you know, type of thing. And, you know, they didn't know who did they go to then. They had a concern, you know, on that. So I guess that would be something that people have, they see something that altered, because human error is what also happened in Texas, along with a lot of other things. But, so I guess that, right? I mean, I know for myself, when I came here for the vaccine, like I had to show my badge. I knew everybody. I knew all the guys and the ones that worked. But still, there was a protocol and they followed
I'm
that.
glad you're bringing that up.
Yeah.
I hear all those.
Yeah. Well, I will relay to this person that maybe that's the other thing is, who do we go to? You know, go to Fiedler, do we go to principals? Who do
Right.
you know? But the security is you, Ray, which I knew you were part of, but I didn't know you were the overall umbrella.
maybe you should sit down here.
So
So,
you're the front line
yeah,
people.
well, so you bring up a really important point, because you know, we're a public building, right? And there's a balance here between, you know, having us look like a prison
Right.
and then having it be a school. And, you know, I feel like in this case, we, you know, swayed too far to being open, right?
Mhm.
We also bring up the concern, we had all sorts of folks in here from noon on, you know, in the building that were able to just walk in because we're a voting place.
Right.
Maybe we need to look and examine those practices and figure out how to do a better job of it. But I heard several concerns that we will take a look at.
And that's really what I mentioned earlier is it's everyone's responsibility because I was in and out all day, as was Janet, who was running it as district clerk. And I appreciate Janet being here both as an employee, but also as an alderman for the city. If we don't know that,
Right.
then we can't address it. And so that's, if nothing else from tonight, we have something that we can identify when we have votes or concerts or science fairs or open house.
Right.
So that's good. And I think somebody else had some questions. Tony?
Yeah, I, listening to everything, tonight, this is it's on the same topic, obviously, but Mr. Hamaker is, and Mrs. Laboon are speaking from, you know, in regard to threats outside the building. And I just had a question regarding, like, once we're here in the building, we have a really good staff who I believe everybody across the board establishes really good relationships with the students. So there are at times a handful of students that are not where they're supposed to be at any given time. So I'm just wondering, we encourage them. I know the safety officers encourage them to get where they're supposed to go. But at any given time, there's a few, not for lack of trying on anyone's part, staff, administration, security, but they're just not where they're supposed to be. So the concern is that it's an issue for their safety and others when they're not in their scheduled spot because they just wander around the building, possibly in the bathrooms, but it can go on for a number of periods throughout the day. So I'm just wondering what the next steps are that we can take to address those issues if you know, it's been consistent with just a small handful of our students, the majority of our students. We have wonderful kids here. I love working here. I love doing what we do every day, but it has become a source of frustration and concern among the staff.
You want, so I think we reached a point in the past 3 weeks, which are probably several months late, that when a student isn't in class, and it's particularly if a student refuses to go to class, it's an immediate 5-day suspension. After that, there'll be a superintendent hearing, and at this point, they're on for the remainder of the year. So you've seen those numbers on our reports that come out. As a school district, and this was part of the conversation that we had today with those individuals. As a school district, we're exceptionally limited in consequences that we can impose to students. It really boils down to suspension. We can leverage counseling, we can leverage, you know, whatever, community service. You know, those are really about it, but according to the regulations, all we can do is suspend a student. Unfortunately, for some of those students, and I think I know the students that you're talking about right now, they're causing more of a concern and a distraction for their own safety and the safety of others, and we're at a point where they just need to be removed from school. We're open to other suggestions as far as what that might look like, but this has become significantly more prevalent after the pandemic, I would say. Would you agree with me on that? And I mentioned earlier that we have some students who have sort of forgotten what school is like. We also have some students who are blatantly disrespectful to any person in the building and who refuse to follow even the simplest of directions. And those students, while I don't want to say are not welcome at our school, well, they're not welcome at our school right now because they are not able to be controlled in a manner in which we have the ability to control them. So for that small number of students, they have been suspended and will continue to be suspended. We have services that we're looking at to provide to them. The conversation with that group that was here today is we have a small number of students who are causing us angst in school, but when they're suspended, they're also wreaking havoc in the community. And what, as a collective community, meaning police department, probation, sheriff, mental health assistance, what are we going to do to provide them with supports? Because these are not students that are even close to graduating. Many of them are really young students, and we have a long go with them. And we need to start doing something different to ensure a better outcome for them.
And I think too, from the bigger, broader question, disrupting instruction versus danger to individuals in the building. And if they were a danger, we would be throwing the proverbial book at them simply because they are young kids, some as young as 12 or 13 or 15, and they are disrupting instruction for themselves and others. Mark's right, that's a regulatory consequence, and I don't want to say our hands are limited, but we're severely hamstrung by what the state says we can do to a student. So we follow that process. We've been talking about this for a while now with this small cache of students who are disruptive to themselves and to others. I think we will accelerate that intervention with them and then work with the community. We have added additional mental health supports. We've added additional liaisons. Historically over the last few years, we've added additional resource officers. But this is a perennial problem for some of our secondary kids, but it's even filtering down to some of our primary kids who are really having difficulties adjusting. I view those as two separate issues, but incredibly important to the safe, effective operations of the district. If that means we need to go to our trustees and our board members and say, we need X to help monitor and improve this, we can do that, and we will do that. After a long time in this profession, I'm not sure what that answer is, except to hold them accountable to those rules and those responsibilities. If that means balancing them, then that will help us eliminate the disruption in school versus a danger. If it's a danger, I expect our officers and our security personnel to do anything humanly possible to keep us safe. If it's a disruption piece, then we'll give the building principals and the hall staff every resource they need to get it right. I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's kind of where we're headed.
We do have a Facebook recommendation here, which states, how about making our campuses like a gated community with a single point of entry, which is staffed throughout the day? All visitors need to check in. This would protect our entire campus. People would not be able to see anything going on within our campus, making it a safer environment for kids and teachers inside and outside the building. So my interpretation of that is basically establishing a secure perimeter around each one of the campuses that people would need to check into. That would, on paper, fix a lot of potential problems, right? We now have a whole block, essentially, if we were to, fence off and gate this entire campus. I guess, that would probably need a further conversation with the whole community. Is that sort of the image that we want to present? And this goes back to that piece of, do we have what would appear to be a prison, or do we have what appears to be an open school where people are coming and going as they need to? And that balance sometimes is tricky to settle on, and I think that would involve further conversation. But I think that pushing for that recommendation, that's not the first time I've heard that in the past couple of days.
We're still gonna run into the same issue as having fun. Look how many vehicles you have to come through that gate. Can't search every around your violating tons of first time fights.
Right.
Such. You're never gonna get anybody, okay, you can't enter unless you're searched. Well, it takes 15 to 20 minutes to search one vehicle thoroughly.
Right.
And that's what we experience. So you're still in the same boat as you are just putting them out. You're still, anything can slip through, through human error or through through a backpack. I really.
Yes.
Hi. So I had a question more about like the staff training. I know you do lockdown, lockout drills. Is there any additional training outside of that that's required of the staff on a regular basis, like on a yearly or bi-yearly to like maintain like the safety standard and bring in new information?
In fact, a lot of our school resource officers present that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, the start of every school year, I can only speak for Prospect, of course. At the start of every school year, I have, at least 8 or 9 different sessions of faculty coming through in small little pods. And I go over everything that we cover, even though it seems, elementary, no pun intended. It's meant to be, I wanna make sure everybody knows exactly from the fire drills to the lockdowns, the lockouts. There's no dumb question because I want to do this every single time, just to make sure, like, well, I've always had this question in the back of my head. Here's a perfect opportunity to ask. And it's solely, that is the only purpose that I'm there for that time span. It's just to teach them once a year about our obligations and whatever trainings that we have within the school. Throughout my campus as well, too, I also have the red folders, which we have the little 6 panels on there, and all the other facets that we have within there. That gets brought up as well, too, because I lean on the teachers as well to say, if you're missing your emergency action procedure sign, or if you're missing your lockdown sign, I try to get in every classroom, but there's a lot of rooms in my building, and I can't interrupt a lot of education just to make sure that those things are in there, usually before or after, but I know at least with Prospect, I try to have that down as best as possible.
And we spend time with our new staff, and over the past 6 or 7 years, we've replaced or have added easily 20 to 30 staff members a year. And we spend time during new teacher orientation, opening days of schools as a collective with the buildings, but then through the mentor-mentee relationships, talking about safety protocols. It's gotten better since we've eliminated the color coding because it was different in schools, and just gotten down to the basic 3. But then talking with the new staff about what they should do in the event of an emergency.
Is that same thing with that for the substitutes? Are they getting similar or a rundown of that training when they are hired to substitute?
I can say that at least recently, we had like 3 new subs, preferred subs, and the assistant principal, I believe, in Dominick's building. Kim reached out to me to at least go over the safety portion of our school with them, sort of like a tour and, what to do in the event of a lockdown.
So just to address that concern, we've had several different things that have come up over the past, I would say, let's say 6 months with regard to substitute teachers. And this has come to the forefront for a couple of reasons. One of our board trustees, Carrie John, brought up a question regarding the training that our substitutes go through. And upon investigating a little bit more, he was absolutely right. We did not do a very good job of providing a comprehensive training for those substitutes. Sometimes they weren't comfortable, enacting some of the procedures because they don't have the confidence, right? They just come into a building, especially if they come in, say, in November or December, it's their first day. They're probably trying to figure out what to do, what not to do, and where to even go to the bathroom safely, let alone what some of the emergency things are that might come into play. Over the past about 6 to 8 weeks, maybe even longer, probably 3 months, we have assigned 2 of our administrators to ensuring that we have a whole new comprehensive training program for our substitute teachers. And part of that, Officer DuBois mentioned, is to make sure that they're caught up to speed on the safety procedures that are in place. But that was an area that we were not doing a really good job in. And there's a couple different reasons for that. One is simply we've had so many substitutes. The staff illnesses have been 3 or 4 times what we've been used to pre-pandemic. So we've had to recruit an awful lot of new substitute teachers. They, of course, go through all the background checks and whatnot to ensure that they're a safe individual. But some of the training needed to be shored up. And I believe we've done a much better job than we had. But thanks for bringing that up.
Do you have like a
flip chart, like at my school, we have a flip chart under every desk. That just, that everyone, all the subs know that's where it is, but it's also in our sub.
Yes.
You guys have
In
that.
fact, Ray, you want to talk about it? Yeah.
Well, we've got the red folders that have all the safety, emergency management, phone numbers, everything. But we're implementing a new flip chart that'll have lockdown, lockout, shelter in place, bomb threat calls, how to use the PA system. So it'll be quick and easy access. It's done right now. It's just getting ready to go BOSI's to get them.
Some of that has come about, even just from some of the drills that we've had. About, I think it was 3 years ago, we ran a EMS drill where a teacher was ill in the classroom, and we came up with all sorts of concerns. And it was our students who actually did the class. As I mentioned, we have an emergency preparedness course at the high school. So they ran a relatively extensive drill. The teacher was incapacitated. What are they going to do? So they ran across the hall to get to the other teacher. That was before our new card swipes. So they locked the door behind them and nobody could get in to give them first aid because the kids were locked out. So we learned what to do there. Other kids wanted to call for help, but there were no phone numbers on the phone. And, unless you work here, you don't know the extension down to the office. So the kids actually helped us put these processes and procedures in place. Every one of our phones now have all the extensions so that if you're a substitute and you don't know, what to, who to call, all the offices, all of it's right there. So we try to regularly make things as simple as possible, but a lot of that comes about from running drills, formally and it's almost informally. And I feel like we've done, we feel like we've got a pretty good system in place. If we didn't, we'd be doing something different, but we're always open to improvements. And really by putting things in practice is where we learn to hone our skills and make revisions to our practice.
And every time we have a drill and every time we have an actual emergency, we have a debrief afterwards with the key players, and then our staff has the opportunity to give us, what I call the Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If we do something, when we first started doing this, probably 11 years ago when I came, we had an emergency drill, a lockdown, which is the worst and most dangerous. And a number of Mr. Siebert's staff sequestered themselves in the safe. It was a while before we went to check on them. We didn't know they were in the safe. So after about an hour in the safe, the building had returned back to normal. We had not yet released the 4 or 5 staff members that were safe in the safe. So we talk about what we do well openly. And then we're like, okay, that was good. We did that. And then we also openly talk about what we messed up on so that we get better at it, so that we know, hey, did we actually release everyone? And did we do it in a timely fashion? And I know when staff and I have sequestered in our safe place, they come in, we talk immediately, grab something in case this isn't a drill. Now, I know firsthand if it is a drill or if it's not a drill, but we go through the same process. And one of the things that we tell kids, and we should be regularly reminding them, it's just not enough to be safe in a locked room. A couple of well-placed shots to a door lock can disengage the lock and somebody can get in. We talk to them, and I tell kids specifically, you grab something hard that you can whip and throw at the person the second that door opens. So when our administrators disengage us from the drill, we have a process in place so they're safe too. So we talk about the good, we talk about the bad, we talk about the ugly, we talk about, okay, what did we not think about that now in this current state of emergency has emerged?
Is there anything else that we might, oh, yes, ma'am.
Do you have like a hotline if kids hear stuff? I mean, they seem to know more than adults.
Sure, well, no, you know what? So that's a great question. And I want to draw everyone's attention to a number, it's on our website, right? The front page of our website. So we have just recently put a phone number that is basically manned 24/7. And if you can't get in touch with the school building or the office and you have a concern, a question, it's 8 o'clock at night and your kid didn't get off the bus from a sporting trip or something, there's nobody at the bus garage. Chances are, believe it or not, Mr. Siebert might not be here at that point in time, and you don't know who to call, That number is on our website. If you call that, that will go right to our security officer that's on site. And it's monitored after that as well, so that we have that. Now, that's really for the adults. We have found that many of our support staff, including our family support workers, which are homeschool liaisons, they're individuals who are advocates for our students. They have very good relationships, and we get a lot of information from them. If they hear something, they may not have, they want to talk to a teacher, they may not want to talk to their parents, but they have a great relationship with maybe their social worker or their family support worker, and they get information to them. There's also just other adults, and remember when I talked about communication and collaboration, there are other adults in the organization that sort of get information from each other, and as well as from students. I know I get information from my son who's friends with kids at the high school here. And there will be something going on and they will actually tell him, hey, tell your dad that this is going on. And that information actually comes back to me. And I really look at that as a credit to some of the atmosphere that we've set up, but also to the students that are here, because in reality, our students don't want bad things to happen. And they will go out of their way to make sure that people know what's happening. So we have that, to answer your question, we have a number that's available, goes either right to, typically goes right to our security guard, because our security guards have everybody's phone number. So if it's a busing incident, they know how to get in touch with busing. If it's a building, they know how to get the principal at home. So that is that. And then, internally, we have a lot of adults who have great relationships with students, and the students will typically contact.
In that same vein, we also have an email address. I know I get it, Levi gets it, and I'm not sure who else gets the communication. Dr. Bueller, so the three of us get it. So if someone didn't have the time or didn't want to, they can send us a quick email. And it comes to the three of us, and literally within seconds, one of the three of us knows, okay, who do we need to contact? Who's the best person to handle this? And we kind of do an ER triage to get that person in front of the right person. Sometimes it has nothing to do with safety. It's like, what time is the concert? What time? So it's that level of instantaneous communication that really helps. Sometimes it's legit and serious. We also are, I think, perhaps one of the strongest districts that monitor social media with our kids, with our staff, with community members. We have people that are very skilled at sifting through some of that social media noise, and that has helped us make sure that kids and families in our schools are safe. Particularly back in September when we had the legitimate issue at that time on a Sunday night where we weren't sure if we were safe. Fortunately, we were, or not that long ago when we had an issue over a prospect. And just kind of in context, at 4:30, we got an all call or an emergency notice from the athletic director and buildings and grounds and Mr. Haley that there was a significant safety issue over on the Prospect campus. Well, this campus is pretty far away from there, but if there's an issue at Prospect, there's also an issue over here and vice versa. We don't treat it as isolated islands. We shut everything down, and we had probably 8 different school districts here for competitions. And within minutes, we had everybody buttoned up and secured. That's kind of the level of intensity. We don't treat it, there is no such thing as kind of a threat. It either is or it isn't. And if we determine that it isn't, we have verifiable proof through every resource we can get that it's not a threat. If we can't get to that point, like the athletic contest or the event in September, then it is a threat. And that really comes down to my call with my cabinet, with safety and our communication staff. If we can't absolutely rule it out with certainty, then it is a threat, and we can treat it as such.
Is there anything else? No?
Well, good job.
All right.
Phone call, 8, 9 o'clock at night. Put flyers up.
That's gonna cost you more than a cup of coffee. More than a cup of coffee, I think, yeah.
Coffee spread. I want to think about something real quick. I'm at the desk down there, and I was told to spend 95% of my time right there, don't move. Think about it now, if there's an incident in high school, my thing with my brain, maybe that somebody else is coming in the front door, he sees that I'm not there. You know, even though I got my pencil, still, at least he sees somebody there.
Right.
I'm kind of worried about that. You know, going on there, and burning down the other end, wide open.
Right.
You know, probably me. Yeah,
Well, I mean, the door is still. locked.
yeah, the door's still locked, but somebody can follow somebody in. Student, teacher. Take care of that.
Levi, anything else online? All right, well, you know, as I mentioned, there's that phone number. I'll also give you my phone number, my personal cell phone number. If you have questions, concerns, thoughts, anything on the way home tomorrow morning when you're on your way to work, going, you know what, I really wish I'd asked this. I really don't feel comfortable with this. You can shoot me a text, give me a phone call. The number is 716-289-3456. So 716-289-3456.
Usually that's the point time he gives out my cell
I know, I was
number.
waiting for that.
But, you know, in that same vein, my number is 716-220-2815. And I can honestly tell you, I've received one prank phone call, and it was actually from a parent, but I think people understand that there's a safety protocol here in place, and they're judicious and they're wise with it. But if you feel, or someone feels that you need to know something, I would much rather, and I know Mark feels the same way, deal with a 2 a.m. wake up call or something that isn't legitimate, but just a frustration. We can put that person in the right context with the right people or person to solve that problem, because I would much rather have a 30-second phone call than deal with something that we could have prevented, whether it's a safety or a health or social, emotional, or even a medical issue with a family or one of our students. And that's really what we do. It's a good investment of time. So the numbers are there. And if someone needs to use them, please give them out freely.
So we had one last Facebook question comment. Do you take our concerns seriously as to say students who show possible threats to either other students, themselves, or teachers? I think I speak pretty confidently when I say yes. We and our school resource officers can attest to this. When we have students who express a threat to either themselves or others, we follow a threat matrix to determine, is the threat credible? Do they have the means? Do they have the motive in order to put something in place? And that happens much more frequently than we would really want to acknowledge and talk about. And those are threats that come through a variety of different channels. And I believe we have done a very good job. If there has been a threat or a concern, well, let's say it's a threat, that has come forward, you know, that has been addressed within minutes.
And well, one of the things that happens, and kind of to what Tawny had mentioned about students who are disruptive, danger is they're gone, you know, and I think I can say this safely in my entire career. If you bring in a weapon, a gun, you commit a violent assault, or you bring in drugs, or you commit an unsafe act, you are gone to a superintendent's hearing and we impose the maximum penalty. In addition to that, what I have done, and I'll be honest with you, sometimes I've gotten a lot of grief for this. Not only are they disqualified because of their transgressions from attending school, we give them tutoring, even though some of the students had aged out, we go above and beyond, but I forbid them to be on campus at extracurricular events, home and away. That is met with some discussions and disagreements with families and kids, oh, I want to go to the sectional contest, I want to go to this event. And my response has been consistently for my entire tenure, if you can't be in school, you can't be at the co-curricular fun events. That's a privilege, it's not a right. And that is another level of a consequence that sends home a message that we're not playing. And that if you're unsafe and you commit dangerous or violent acts, or you make us unsafe, we will do everything in our power to keep the rest of us safe. And if that's an inconvenience to the student who can't attend a basketball game or a cheerleading event or a lacrosse championship, so be it. You don't get there because we just want to be mean. We get there because there has been a bona fide concern of conduct. And I take that very seriously, even though sometimes I do get, some backlash from that. I don't know that necessarily that happens often, but if it happens once and it corrects the behavior, then we're in a better place. Some of us who are older remember the old school. We can't do all of the old schools, but we can certainly send a clear message that safety is a very serious thing that we will take and do everything in our power to make sure that everyone is safe.
Just want to say on our end too, that means that, they get threat assessment done. They need to get, mental health help sent to WCA by us or counselor for 911 if it's that immediate, or if there's a charge applicable on top of what the school's decided then each other. So.
All right, so I guess sort of just wrapping it up again, I want to extend our thank you to City Nation Marshals. Thank you. Kent County Sheriff, Alderperson Cook, our school resource officers, police department, probation, our school board. We've got a pretty good cross section of all the movers and shakers in the city and the county here, and that really allows us to be able to provide the best environment for our students and our staff. So just thank you again for their support, and thank you for all for coming and sharing tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.